Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Two Having to Roll podcast. My name is Oliver. Today, Robin and I are joined by our friend Geoffrey. Geoffrey is a long-term live-action role player. He's played in several LARP systems over the years, but he's also a long-term player of Empire LARP, which is the game system Robin and I have been covering this past year. He has been in the game since year one, since the first event. He's also been part of the Nation of Dawn since then as well. So it was a very insightful and very interesting and fun conversation that we had with Geoffrey. We hope you enjoy it.
What about her?
Oh, well, I mean, Robin goes without saying, but I think Robin goes without saying.
Careful.
Wow.
Obviously.
She's got a sword. I can see it.
Don't instigate. Don't
This
instigate.
is a great start. I'll be right back, Geoffrey.
Jeffrey's been on for 2 seconds. He's already instigating battles between me and Robin. This is why you're one of my favorite LARP people. Geoffrey, how long have you been doing? How long have you been in the LARP hobby?
What century is this? 1997 I started, so I've
Whoa.
been doing it for over 20 years now.
Oh wow, okay.
Wow.
So,
I came across it at, so I'm going into the explanations now. I came across it at university, University of Wales, Aberystwyth. And they had the Freshers' Fair, and I was there in the line, and there were a couple of guys sword fighting up and down the line to keep everybody entertained. And I looked at them and went, that hobby. That'll do, mate.
That's my life from now on.
Yep. And so jumped into that. So my first one for that was Aberthy, Guild of Adventurers.
Okay.
Their university system, little LARP one. Since then, I have done over a dozen different LARP systems.
Wow. What was it like finding LARP games back then without obviously the internet was around, but without the community, like the social media aspect of it?
Had to get lucky, had to go by word of mouth to a fair extent. In that case, I found them. They then introduced me to some of the fest style size LARPs, which then meant you got contact with everybody else in all the other groups. So I went to, that'd be the Lorien Trust, national ones, and meeting people there who said, and I said, I'm going to this place after this summer, and they said, oh, we've got a LARP system there, because of course you meet LARPers somewhere and they all know all the other LARPs that near them.
Yeah.
And with a bit of looking around, I could find some stuff. And the LARP groups, the organizations tended to stick themselves up online fairly quickly.
Oh, right.
That even before social media, you could go looking for them and they would have a web page with just, this is where we meet, this is what we do, on the basis that while certainly early LARP was fairly protectively insular, for want of a better term.
Yeah.
They were on the fair assumption that only fellow geeks and nerds would be looking for LARPers online, which tended to work.
Yeah.
This was also before, for that matter, Lord of the Rings came out, which popularized a lot of the fantasy concept.
Oh, yeah. That was a big one. That was a big landmark in pop culture, Lord of the Rings, most definitely.
I did some reading, and actually some of the first LARPs were inspired by the book Lord of the Rings. They had people doing, and now we're going to do the Hobbit War. This was in the USA in the 1960s or something.
Nice. Yeah, so the Lorien Trust is still going. So that's one of the bigger ones, but because there's not many big like fest LARPs, is there, in the UK? How many are there, would you say?
Depends where you put the level of it. I mean, I think of the big LARPs as over 1,000 people.
Yeah.
And in that case, there's maybe 3 regular ones. That is LT, PD, Profound Decisions, and I think Fools and Heroes.
Yeah.
There's quite a lot of other, what you might call regional LARPs, that have got the nearest of 5 counties or so busy sending people to them. And some of those are fairly popular. Labyrinth, for example, down in southeast London. I think there's one called The Vale up in the northwest. Skullduggery in North Kent I've played in once or twice, and that had fun. And then you get onto the local regional ones, such as mostly university ones or local clubs. That will happily go anywhere from a dozen people to 50 or so on the books.
It's crazy, isn't it? How a hobby like that hasn't caught fire quite like. So we we came to LARP through like via cosplay and then via
Yep.
D&D, and then we entered LARP. Cosplay, when we started getting into cosplay and going to conventions, suddenly cosplay and conventions were a big popular thing, and then all of a sudden there was a convention on every single weekend. It amazes me in LARP how there's like you say, 3 over 1,000 people festival LARPs. How come there's not? It's grown in popularity. Why do you think there's not been an explosion in just there's a festival LARP every weekend type thing, which is probably a good thing because I don't think it helped the con scene.
Yeah.
Well, why did the convention and cosplay scene explode?
I would imagine it was all the media, as
Quite
in
possibly.
yeah.
Good. Can you think of a good, sympathetic, and enthusiastic portrayal of LARP in the media?
Yeah, this is a good point. Hey, well,
The one that people remind me of is, there's you.
I mean, I know one. Yeah, I know one.
Yeah.
It's called Two Having to Roll. This is our mission. I mean, I will say it's probably not a goal of mine to inspire loads of festival LARPs. Because the thing is
Well, I'll warn you that about 4 years ago now, in the years BC, before COVID, we did have a trio of cheerful gamers who joined Wintermark in Empire.
Yes.
And did a large podcast about it.
Yes.
And suddenly we got an extra 100 people every event.
Inundated,
and it went up significantly.
Yes.
Because you get some people, you spread it by word of mouth, it expands massively.
Yes.
And LARP has been cheerfully bouncing up and getting more interesting. We've got a long way to go before some of the things like, if you believe there's a German LARP that has got several dozen thousand people.
Oh yeah, what's that one called? I've definitely.
I don't know.
Man. I'll have to find out.
It is a case of you've got to have the culture, and you've got to have the population, and you've got to have the space to do it.
Yes.
I ran into, ironically, in discussion on a computer game, I ran into a couple of LARPers from Finland who were having the problem of, if they want to just take over a huge sprawling river valley with forests and lakes and woods all through it, they can trivially.
Yes.
And if they carefully scratch up all the LARPers in their country, they might just make 200.
Wow. Yeah.
So in their case, they've got all the space to run a LARP, but not the population density to do it.
Yeah.
Whereas the UK has almost the other option.
We do
the
have
other way around.
Yes, we do have the opposite problem. It seems. Hey, I mean, there's tons of space. It's just trying to find the available space that people are willing to do it.
In the UK, there's something like 25,000 historical reenactors. There's probably a good 15,000 LARPers spread across various genres and games. Yeah. Although, of course, there's a lot of overlap. Can you think of anywhere? There aren't too many places where you could hold a festival for, if you invited all of those, 40,000 people.
Yeah.
Glastonbury comes to mind.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing about LARP is that you have to. It's not by definition. It's not really passive. You can come to. I think you definitely can come to Empire and just be like, oh, I'm going to play. But I've literally had, since we've started doing this and started banging the drums about it, I've had friends and family members, as I've told them about it, said, "Oh yeah, we could go. We would like to come and watch." And I'm like, "It's not something you come watch. Like, it's not a public event with like a Comic-Con where you general public just wander in and go, let's see what this is about."
Over the years, I have encountered quite a few people who've come in on that way. I had a friend in my first LARP system. He invited his dad along, who is this broad-shouldered, burly, white-bearded gentleman who spent the first session or so wandering around and observing everything and sitting by campfires. Last time I heard, he decided to jump in and was basically playing a fairly sedentary role as a master smith, because he looked like he could be an old blacksmith.
Yes.
But yeah, coming, and it's some of the advice I give on the forums and similar is, if you want to come and spend the first event sitting around the campfires, listening to the stories, spectating, drinking, getting involved in silly things that aren't too big, it's a perfectly good way to get into it.
Yeah, and this is why I like Empire. I mean, we're going to talk about Empire because that's the thing that for Robin and I, like, this is our first year LARPing, and Empire is our only experience of LARP, so we do have a very we do have a narrow experience in that case, but I think Empire, I do say that to people. I'm saying you if you want to come in as a spectator, yeah, you have to play the game, but it's probably one of the better games to come to be passive, because you can literally just come sit by your fire, and if you wanted to, just do nothing all weekend and just watch the world go by. That's pretty cool.
Do you think that's maybe what people find a little bit daunting sometimes with LARP, as opposed to comic conventions and so on, is the fact that if they come to an event, they've got to take part in a way. And I think, do you not think like a lot of people seem to get in their head that, oh no, I need to go and fight and do this and do all these things, and I just want to come and watch and see if I'm going to be okay?
That is something that's cropped up. Now, you said Empire is your first LARP. You've got both a good and a bad side. The good side, because it is, I think, an excellent LARP. It's wonderfully immersive. It's got a very high costume standard, and it's also got a very gentle learning curve. It's got a learning curve. You can go as fast as you like on it.
Yeah.
The complicated point. From my observations, the complexity of a LARP system is inversely proportional to the number of participants.
Yeah.
Which means that I've played in little systems of 12 to 30 people, and they've been able to have some quite complicated and detailed rules. On the other hand, you get to the scale of 5,000 people, like Lorien Trust or Empire, and it had better be simple and it had better be easy.
Yes.
Because apart from anything else, the referees need to know all the possible nasty interactions. So for some LARPs, some people like starting in the small LARPs where they can go along and know everybody and go, there's one plot line, it's that one, I can watch it, I can keep out of its way if I want to.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, Empire is big enough that it can cheerfully support whole groups of people who don't get involved in the plot massively much.
Oh yeah, I've spoken to people that have literally said, yeah, we've just come, our friend comes and does all the fighting. We literally we've just come from uni to dress up a little bit, sit by a fire and drink all weekend, and that's awesome. That's awesome.
Heck,
you can do that.
Just in the last year, admittedly, Dawn is a slightly biased position for this because we've got the tournament square that tends to attract all sorts of stuff. But if how much of a game would you have if you just sat in your little tent selling coffee to passers-by all event? You'd have a whole slew of things happening in front of you. You'd have everybody dropping by for a chat and a drink.
Yes. I don't think you can, like I said, I can see how you could just be, like I say to people, look, you can come and you can just be passive, and because I've tried to say this to my parents. I was like, yeah, you'd love it. I've tried to say this to everyone. I was like, pretty much everyone would love it. And I say to them, you could just be passive and just be like, oh yeah, you don't need to do anything. Just come and go to the bars. And you can just sit by the fire and just watch the world go by. But I know myself, there's no way that they could be passive for an entire weekend, because someone would come up and talk to them. Someone would come up and be like, oh, hey, would you like to buy this? Would you like to do this? And then, like you say, something would happen in front of your eyes, and then like, oh, I might follow them and see what happens here.
Most passive case, you'll get somebody coming up and saying, quick, have you got any spare this? Even if it's just some money to donate to our great cause. It's necessary because of this.
Yeah. So anyway, we've already started talking about Empire. When did you start Empire? I already know the answer to this. When did you start in the Empire system?
Year one, event one, which would have been 2012 or so.
2012.
It was it was their very first event. Impressively, Profound Decisions had a good history of running LARP events.
Yes,
they had an established customer base. They had many previous customers. They had an accepted and expected standard of play.
Yeah, so they had a game before, right? They had
several.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
Maelstrom was one, which was fantasy colonial, could be described.
Yes.
Odyssey, which was mythic East Mediterranean. They also had another one before that one, which was called Zero, which I didn't encounter much. But my point is they were able to say, please buy all your tickets 6 months in advance.
Yes.
And they've functionally kickstarted their system. So they were able to start right from event 1 with the orc masks, the orc armor, the Senate building, the pub building, lots of extra things, which was good because I was there at the very first event. They had, as you might expect, a big uptick at the start. They had something like 2,000 people that first event, and it went downhill after that for a little while because the first event was freezing cold.
Yes. Yeah. Well, this is the thing with that was the thing that we encountered, Robin and I, because being a new hobby, we are not like I work outside or whatever, but we're not like outdoorsy people, hobbyists. Like we're not campers. We're not. So we've done cosplay and D&D. And going to conventions in costumes in a convention hall is very different from being out in a muddy field running around. So the elements were something that we didn't worry about, but we were very conscious of the fact that we're not used to this part of this type of hobby. We could probably role play, we could probably costume up.
Yes, it was the sort of thing that the campers and the reenactors went, hey, we can handle this.
Yeah. And
the more tabletop gamers went, we're being rained on. What's going on?
What is this? What is
well,
this?
That's the thing. Like, I knew I was a wimp in the cold. So when it came to the first event that we went to, which was E1 this year, I ended up...
That was pretty chilly.
It was cold, but I had like pockets all on the inside of my dress, and I had little hot hands that I put into all of them. So I was walking around with a heated dress on, and it was great.
So hot hands.
That's the advice I give to people.
Being the little thing, the chemical things you rub, and they go all warm.
There's an amazing amount of space in the costume in any of the costume briefs for extra hot gear or extra cold gear. Yeah. And indeed, they do have a policy of we don't care if it gets to the point where it's look immersive and on brief or have a nasty accident due to the weather, just wear whatever, mate.
Yeah,
stick a jumper on.
Yeah, I did actually catch that. So when we were at E1 and they had the player meeting that you ran off from, Robin, to go get your kit on, ironically, they were talking about kit and they were talking about warmth, and I remember them going over that, being like, yeah, like honestly, if it gets to a certain time of night, don't worry about going and getting your rain jacket on. Like we're not, no one's going to blame you for getting your rain jacket on if it's freezing. Yeah.
An anecdote from the coldest event. There's quite a lot of overlap between reenactment and LARP, and so quite a lot of the traders actually do both. And the first event, they had a guy who was there who was a small blacksmith, and he actually had a small forge going and was making things. He was doing things like making extra tent pegs for people.
Oh, wow.
And lots of people had seen the weather forecast and brought a huge wool blanket to keep themselves warm at night. Good plan. And in the morning they went, I want to stay in my blanket. What can I do? Ding! And the blacksmith spent most of the morning hammering bar stock into a nice C shape with a single bar over it and making cheap ass cloak pins and flogging them to people.
Nice. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, that's the only thing that, because I do like their attitude towards kit and beginner kit, because they have this thing called aspirational kit. So kit doesn't have to be perfect the first time you arrive, as long as you're aiming to improve it. And I never judged anyone based on their kit when we first arrived, but there was a few people that I felt sorry for, not because they had a cheaper cloak because of the way it looked, but because of it wasn't doing anything for keeping them warm. So there were people coming with like, the cheaper polyester cloaks that you might get.
Very nice looking costume from Wish.
Exactly,
capacity of tissue paper.
And you're like, yeah, it looks it, and then but it was so cold that first event, and I'm just like, oh, that is not keeping you warm at all.
A couple of notes on the costume. As I've told people, because I'm one of the forum moderators.
Yes, you are.
And but one of the things I tell people is, however good your costume is, there will be somebody who looks much better, and there will be somebody who looks much worse. The second point to tell them is there are photos on the website and the wiki of people looking awesome. those are the best photos taken by professional photographers over years and years of role playing of the people who may have spent an awful lot of time and money making that.
Yes.
That's the top 1%. It's not representative.
Yes. 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 I mean, one of the other things that maybe concerns people coming into LARP, and especially since I'm trying to, if we're trying to get people into, especially the Empire system, one of the biggest concerns that obviously comes up for most people is the barrier for entry when it comes to the cost. You know, I don't think Empire is that bad. Probably, especially if you're coming maybe in the summer for that reason of. Because honestly, sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, you just need this, and I'm like, really? You need like a warm cloak? Like you need base layers and a really warm cloak and decent boots, you know, which can set you back a bit, you know.
Yeah. How do you want me to answer that? What you need, or what the minimum is, or the cost?
Okay, here's a good question. What was your first kit like way back when?
Very first one. Come on, Geoffrey.
Very first one, I think I was playing Arrogant Young Noble. I got a turtleneck sweater like this, pinned it over and had a nice little brooch pin there, and I think a leather jacket over that with a belt with a sort of belt over that from charity shop, plain trousers and some walking boots. That was my very first character. I upgraded from then. There's an awful lot that can be done via charity shops, via a little bit of sewing and alteration on the dead simple beginner level, and indeed from other LARPers, because for everybody joining, there's probably several LARPers going, I've got this huge pile of stuff I'm never going to wear again, and I don't want to bin it, and who can I give it to? And often they will either donate it or, you know, sell it on £5 to a good home, sort of thing.
I'm glad you said that, because that would have been my answer. Would be like, friends is the best thing ever. Ever make friends, and people will. Because we've had a few new players come up and say, oh yeah, no, I haven't. You know,
your costumes were particularly good for new starters.
But that's the thing. We had a little bit of a jump start just because we were into making costumes for cosplay. You know, so we already had an interest in, like, kit is one of the aspects of LARP that interested us anyway.
I think, like, specifically as well, the type of cosplay that you and I were into were kind of like our Lord of the Rings and so on. So we had already had an idea on organic materials and using wool and leather. So because we'd already done that part, we had piles of wool and leather and fur.
We
and
also
knew
the difference between cosplay and something being practical, because once you've made a load, and in a convention, if you are to look like, oh yeah, I'm this Viking warrior, you only need to look like it is a functional, like, fur coat. It doesn't need to actually protect you from the elements. It doesn't need to stay together if it's a load of armor, because I made a load of plastic armor. I made a Jaime Lannister full-on Lannister armor, but it was all out of thermoplastic, and it would be absolutely useless for LARP because I couldn't sit down in it, I couldn't run in it, I couldn't do anything in it. It was just supposed to look good. So I knew the difference between, I know what I need to get and I know how to make it, because when you're making it, you're like, this isn't just cosplay. I need to actually run around in this, need to sit down and drink and stay in it all day long, you know?
Yeah. The more martial cosplay outfits don't tend to have the criteria of, can you actually fight in it?
No way. No, you'd be surprised. I'd like spending time in, especially the competitive cosplay scene, and you see these some of these amazing costumes from all these video games where they've got all the stylized armors.
LEDs.
Those folks can't move in those. Let me tell you, there is hell behind stages before they go out on stage, and you're just like, you see the people and they can't move and they are sweating and they can't even get up the steps onto the stage, but they look cool on the stage. So no good for LARP. But we kind of knew the parameters going in.
The criteria for costume for LARP you can get away with some fairly fragile ones if you're not planning on doing a lot of the actual fighting. I mean, some of our friends in LARP, some of the costumes I've seen, you can have some beautifully ornate ones.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
As long as they're not going to get rough and tumbled. And if they are, you're going to need to have something that you can wear while going up and down steps at speed, falling through a bramble bush, bouncing off a tree, and running through the woods with Aranel in Hot Pursuit, for example.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well, so this is the problem with our new costume ideas, is that we want something flashy, and we're probably going to be rough and tumbling in them as well. So this is the challenge. Which brings me to the most important question, Geoffrey. Why Dawn when you first started?
Oh, when Empire started, they put out a full-page costume brief. I've still got it somewhere. We just had a case of here is a page on each of the nations with a photo of some of the costumes, some of the outfits. This was particularly good. Well, they've been teasing it for quite some time, because they've been doing pictures and notice boards and things at their previous events.
Nice.
They were running. I mean, Odyssey was going before Empire was. So at Odyssey events, they had a little stall up saying, "This is our next game. These are the looks we are after." Odyssey, for that matter, also had a fairly high costume brief. And when that came out, a lot of the more experienced and veteran LARPers were able to look through their wardrobes and go, with a bit of effort, I can do 3 or 4 out of these 10 possible nations.
Yes.
Now, in previous LARPs, I have tended to go to a certain extent towards the martial knight archetype, or occasionally the magical knight archetype. And I played wizards and druids and alchemists and various others. I'm really bad at playing evil characters. So to a certain extent, playing the knight is almost my default character type.
Yes.
For which I could blame whichever one of my parents gave me interesting books of myths and legends and things.
Yeah, I could empathize.
But that meant that when I started looking, I went, what options are available here? Interestingly, my first character wasn't a particularly Dornish guy. I was recovering from a knee injury, and I thought, I'm going to play the combat medic. I'm going to play the guy at the back holding up all the knights with bandages and potions and various other things. And I joined a contingent of armored knights. My second character was full armored knight character types, but I looked at the brief. It looked cool. It looked in your face. It looked bold to the point of arrogant. It looked melodramatic. It looked like the sort of contingent that would chew the scenery and regurgitate it as glorious ham and cheese.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, that there's only so much of an answer you can give to that, because when people ask me like why Dawn, I was just like, because I read the brief and I was just like, yep, that one. That was kind of it. I know other players are different. They like to jump around. Have you had any other characters in any other nations, or?
No, I'm on my 3rd Dornish character out of 3 characters in Empire.
Wow. So you don't want to leave.
A while ago, as an example, this may put some people off, I'm afraid. Somebody did a sketch going comparing all the various nations in Empire to groups of school children, or rather groups of high schoolers. And Dawn looked like a contingent out of a musical or possibly Glee. Brightly coloured, immensely emotional, and inclined to burst into song at the least opportunity.
Yeah,
we're Glee.
We're Glee. Well, that's the thing, like you say, it might put some people off, but that's the good thing about that's a good thing about the Empire system, is that that you want to show what's great about it, and if you don't like what's great about us, it's cool. There's other nations you can go join.
It comes in a variety of flavors.
Exactly.
Choose what you like.
Exactly. It's great. And it's funny how people do that. They like to jump around nations, which I think is amazing. But there are a few people like yourself that like to just stick with the nation. But this is
interestingly, I've noticed that the briefs tend to attract people who want to play the briefs, which therefore reinforces it.
Yes.
Which means that, for example, in the League, you'll get quite a lot of people who like doing complicated internal politics and trade cartels and big impressive business ventures in a fantasy setting. And that's great, because it reinforces it. And this does mean, admittedly, that in Dawn you get the sort of contingent who are always prepared to get out of the mud, brush the blood off their shield, and scream defiance one more time before charging outnumbered 10-1. Which is exciting, if not restful.
Yeah, but that yeah, I think you're spot on, because I've had a few more veteran players come up to us, and I have this opinion of some of the other newer Dornish players as well, and they said, oh yeah, you've embraced the brief really well, and I've kind of thought, well, if it was just all right, we're all just generic like D&D, just like, okay, just pick a whatever fantasy character you want. This is how I would play anyway. If they were like, right, pick a fantasy character, I would be knight in shining armor, trying to prove himself, knight errant, and I would be living the Dornish brief regardless. So like you said, it's like, so if you look at the brief and go, yeah, that's me, and then you go in, you just act how you're going to act anyway.
Can't easily. The way you can tell the difference between the players who are playing the brief because it interests them, and the players who are playing the brief because that's them, is when if they choose to jump around nations afterwards.
Yes,
I suspect.
Yeah, and they struggle. So some people, I've noticed quite nicely actually, some people like lean into that. I've noticed there are people in different nations that like to have a backstory of, oh, I'm actually from this nation because that's more how I act, but really my friends are in this nation, so they go, oh, I'm whatever, I'm a Dornish noble, I don't act like a Dornish noble, but that's really because I'm from Navarre or something, that's why I act like a Navari, but I quite like, I like that as well.
Yeah, you do get several people who might be playing, if you had, say, a brief is about that space, you'd have people playing around the edge about to go into a different brief.
Yeah.
So you'll have people who are my second character, for example, was the Brass Coast End of Dawn.
Yes.
Because he was a Dornish pirate lord.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
He was quite Dornish, but he was being Dornish on a ship.
Yeah, yeah. That's one thing. Yeah, that's one thing as well. So like in D&D, you can play. It's perfectly fine to play against type, especially when you're doing individual characters, and you go, okay, even if you're playing in any setting. So say if you're playing in like Middle Earth, and you have a dwarf, and your player's like, oh yeah, I want to play like this, and it's not really how a dwarf is supposed to be. It's like, well, that's why you're unique, and that's why you're the hero, because you're not like every other dwarf. So like Gimli's not like every other dwarf. But when you've got nations with players, the players can't really do that. Otherwise, the entire thing changes.
I've always thought of it as, if you had maybe 5 criteria for a character, and you play 4 of them, you could probably play 4 of them on brief and maybe 1 of them off brief.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you've got to be mostly on it.
Yeah, because otherwise the whole thing changes. The whole
does
thing
help.
shifts.
Yeah. I mean, I've played in other Fest LARPs where it's almost been D&D, and in that you have trouble telling various groups apart quite a lot of the time. Empire has the concept not only of we've got set costume briefs, but also of the hearth magic for each nation, i.e. there is an in-game nudge to stay within the brief, which means you're not going to go too far off it. This does have the great thing, though, of it means you can tell groups of people by their dress, by their speech, by their behavior. You can tell what nation they are. And this makes for a lot more character. It makes for a lot more flavor. It means, for starters, we can do terrible international jokes.
Yes. Yes.
So the March of the Dornishmen, the League, went into a bar and exactly, but you could see that could run. You couldn't easily do that in D&D if you got everybody
you're almost
generic spot with a sword.
Yeah, you're almost leaning into the opposite of what I was trying to say before. Instead of being like, oh, I'm the exception to the rule, you want to lean more into the rule. You want to go, right, okay, I'm going to be the stereotype. And sometimes I think it's great. Like one of my favorite moments from last year, it was like E3. I walked up to, I was trying to get into this wedding in the Brass Coast.
I heard your podcast,
and I did have, to be fair, I had flowers in my I had the flower crown on, but basically I just had a blue shirt, normal trousers. I was just in my Yo-folk, just normal, very plain garb. And I walked up and I'm like, oh yeah, I would like to come into, I was trying to get my way in there. And I was like, oh, I'm actually looking for stories of true love, la la la. And I was, I had a little bit of a cadence to my voice. And like halfway through my speech, the freeborn was just like, Dornish, aren't you? And I'm like, yeah, oh, come on. And it's just like, you don't even have to say, oh, I'm from Dorne. You just, the way you act and the way you hold yourself subconsciously puts you in that category, which can be in the modern world can be a bad thing, but
Yep.
it's something you've got to be very careful with, but it is a very special thing at Empire because you're trusting thousands of people, like PD are trusting thousands of people to go, right, okay, here are these 10 defined groups, choose one you like and define them. You know, and they're trusting them to do that.
They've given a certain amount of they've said this is the definition of them, fit it.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
Yeah.
But to loop back to one of your earlier questions, I told people I was joining Dawn, and they said, yes, that's a good fit for you.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, I dropped by while everybody was putting their tents up, and dropped by on some friends of mine who were in Highguard. Like it was before time in, the game hadn't got started yet. I was just wandering on my way to something. Thought I'll just drop in. So I pull back the tent at the flap of their tent and say, "Hello, everybody."
Yeah.
They went, "Stop being so bloody Dornish."
Stop being so Dornish. And that's the thing. Like, you're probably at that stage where you probably struggle to join another nation without bringing that Dornish, because I mean, you've been in the nation since E1 year one as well. Yep. So you have actually influenced the nation as well.
You have shaped.
Oh,
Dawn.
crumbs! I hope not.
It's your fault, Geoffrey, that every time we go to another nation, they're just like, bloody Dornish.
You influenced us.
Do I get credit for that as well?
Yeah.
Good. I'm happy.
Well, that's so. Yeah, we definitely gravitated towards. Well, I'm not going to speak for Robin, but I definitely gravitated towards your style of role playing because of the way definitely way I entered the game. I'm just saying we because I know Robin was similar. So we don't tend to like. I'm not great with absorbing loads of rules and loads of information before I actually play a game. Even if it's a sport, I'm just like, I prefer to just play it and then the rules will make sense. Yeah. So what I liked about Empire was like, you know, you can decide what your character knows and what they don't. The only part of the wiki because the wiki can be daunting.
The wiki is huge.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's bigger than the Bible yet.
Yeah, and it's a lot, and and there's changes and things like that. It's difficult to understand, and the only thing I was like, right, okay, I know what nation I want to be in. I know the archetype I kind of want, and I'll just make sure I know the Knight Errant brief, and that'll do. And then I'll just learn in game, and the game's set up for that. But that's why I definitely was gravitated towards you in roleplay because you know. Rion knows Dornish history because you know Dornish history so well. So it's better learning about Dorne from someone like you with your stories than it is reading it off the wiki, you know?
Yes, for starting players, what you need to learn off the wiki is your character's name, your character's nation, for preference, what province in that nation he's from, or she, and approximately what your skills do. That's it. The rest of it's optional. Pick it up and play.
I can attest to that because that's literally how I entered the game.
Same. I mean, like exactly the same. I am rubbish. Like learning a load of rules ahead of something. I forget the original rules that I've learned if I carry on reading through it. So I was like, I'll learn everything else in the game. I just need to know what are the safety rules? How do I use my abilities? And kind of remember where I'm from. And although I
sometimes you don't even know that. Sometimes you don't even know any of that. Right?
That's just me. It's not my character. But yeah, that was the thing though. I went and I remember like when we get into our first ever experience of it, and I remember standing there going, I can't remember where I'm from. I know I'm in Dawn, but which one am I in Dawn? It was just panic.
I have amnesia. But then, it's fine.
That's the thing. I think it's just like showing people that it's okay. You don't have to memorize the whole wiki. Just, you know, like you just said, Geoffrey, just know your name, know where you're from, rough idea of the rules, go.
You didn't use the excuse you've got ingrowing horns, did you?
What?
Ingrowing antlers. I'm sorry, I can't remember at the moment. I've got a headache.
Yeah, she probably does. The thing is, because I know Robin so well, sometimes Aranel will say something or she won't get something. And I'm just like, no, that is just, I'm not even talking to Aranel currently.
Look,
I'm literally talking to
I
Robin.
am sorry for almost having you killed by orcs, okay? I didn't realize they were going to try and kill you. Neither did Arnell. Thought they were just really friendly.
One of my local LARP friends here, every time he sees me, he apologizes for getting my previous 2 Empire characters killed.
Yeah. So yeah,
It wasn't him.
Both of them?
Yeah,
It wasn't him. He's exaggerating.
So that I was just about to ask you that. So this is your 3rd Empire character. The
Yep.
first 2,
2.
as you've just revealed, died. Did they both die on the battlefield?
Yes, I mean it's possible to retire a character. It's possible to drop it and go, I'm going to play something else now. There have been a few cases where there've been quite a lot of cases where characters have left play peacefully for one reason or another. But yes, both my first 2 characters died messily on the battlefield.
So what was your first character's archetype? Because you said he was a healer.
Yes.
Of sorts,
First character, Peter Vorsch, playing a knight errant physician. So his job was, a knight of dawn would fall on the field. He'd run up and go, right, okay, potions, herbs, bandages. Right, okay, you're back. Get in there. And his quest was to do that to 40 different knights.
Nice.
So he'd carefully get their name when he did it. But there was a point after a couple of years, the battle, in the first ever battle that PD did, Dawn got a hammering. I've got a story about that, but you don't hear it now. So my group went from 12 people to 4 people. And so it wasn't I wasn't quite so attached to the character then. And a year or so after that, in the Battle of Icca's Tears, when the war rhino was driving us up the slope and the orcs were following us behind, laughing and stabbing up the stragglers. And I went, this is no way for a Knight of Dawn to die, stabbed from behind while retreating. So I turned and charged the entire orc line to buy everybody else another 10 seconds. Yeah. So that guy got killed off.
That's the way to go. Yeah. If you're going to go in Dawn, that's the way to go.
Pretty epic.
Second character, he ended up as Earl of his house, Earl Argent Drummond.
That's nice.
Drummond, spelt the same way as a sort of ship, if you know that one. Yep. And so they were pirate, pretty much a house of pirates, or sorry, aggressive traders.
Aggressive traders, yes.
Correct.
Foreigners don't deserve to have money. It's just and there was a big battle, and we stuck together, and the army moved left, and we moved right, and we got cut off, refused to leave our wounded, got chopped down one after another. And all the knights and nobles of that house died on that field, holding each other's hands to a fair extent. After which we decided to break the group up on the grounds there wasn't. Some people wanted to go to different groups or nations. Some people wanted to leave, and there wasn't anybody else to hold the group together. So we went, this is a good point. We're going to break it up. How we did it in that system was the house still exists in the setting, but they're not sending anybody else to Anvil.
Yeah. That's the thing. It must be difficult sometimes, because when, like I say, you've got the 2 type of people that, people who very much identify with their nation and can't see themselves anywhere else, and other people that go, oh yeah, you know what? And I definitely know, because people talk about it. Yeah, people literally plan their deaths pretty much and go, oh yeah, I'm fed up with this character,
and plan their next characters.
Yeah, which is totally fine. Yeah, which is great.
It's almost said that the best way to ensure your character's survival is to have the next one already.
Yeah, exactly. Which why you know what, I've never, even in D&D, I don't have a backup character. Everyone always like backup characters. I'm like, no, why would I want a backup character?
Never had a backup.
I'm not going, because it's not going to enter my mind.
I have a backup character planned, and I'm planning, if this current one dies anytime soon, to recycle back into the same group. I have a concept already planned. Name is known to other characters that they can drop their name in conversation. Because what you want to avoid in that circumstance is turning up as the old friend who nobody's ever mentioned before.
Nobody's ever mentioned. That's what I love about one thing I do love about LARP and the system is that I'm coming as a new player, and you come in with a group of other new players, especially this year after like there was a 2-year gap with COVID, coming in with new players, and then you had a load of veteran players, and there was a lot of established characters there. That if they die, it's a obviously it's a big deal. It's a big deal when anyone dies, but people knew their characters, and it would be odd for them to be like, oh yeah, my twin brother is here and he can take my stuff, and that's not okay. But all the new players, that is completely okay for them to do. Like the new players come in, it's their first ever event, they die on the Saturday, and then the next day or later the Saturday, their twin brother comes up or their twin sister comes up and goes, hey, you met my brother earlier. Okay.
Yeah, this is the thing it's the same thing for that matter in D&D. If you were running a game for new D&D players and one of them died in the first combat encounter, would you permit them to turn up as more or less an identical character?
I personally would be fine with it, because I'd be like, it's fine. But yeah, I see where you're going with it. But if later in the campaign, no.
But if it was later in the campaign and they had established, for example, that they were a member of an order of knights with pretty much identical military training, and if one of them died later on in that, having already built in the plot, and you said, here is another member of this order, would that be acceptable?
Yeah.
It's a tricky moral line. There aren't any rules against it, but it's
you probably find
I'm not sure what the right term would be.
Yeah.
It's a case of are you taking the mickey, or is this a carefully organized fair play?
But you also have like that social the social thing of having so many people on the field that if you did do that, that's probably why it's not a written rule, is because it's okay for it's just something I observed being like, oh yeah, new players is okay. But
it wouldn't be noticed quite so much.
Yeah.
If you turn up as an identical character in the same group in the same nation, that's fairly obvious, and you better have a damn good reason.
Yeah, it's like, wait.
On the other hand, you can swap them around like mad.
Yeah.
I used to make a joke in the middle years of Empire that there was a revolving door between Dawn and Highguard.
Yeah.
Whereby they went through, they changed tabards, dropped off the sense of humor or the stick up there, and they didn't even need to change out their plate mail.
Yeah, well, that's a good one, because I've heard people say like there's been changes, people who've been playing the game for a while, and really the game, like, when did you say the game first started? It's not that old of a game, really, is it?
This was his 8th year of play we have completed.
Yeah, so it's still early.
Bear in mind 2 years of COVID lockdown.
Yeah.
So 8 years.
It's still early days then, isn't it? And people are already saying that, oh yeah, this nation is different from what it used to be. This nation is different from what it used to be, for better, for worse, whatever.
What defines early days for LARP system?
I have no idea.
The Lorien Trust is, I think, an anomaly, given that it's been going since 1995.
Yeah.
But a lot of LARP systems, a lot of smaller LARP systems only have had a tendency to last a couple of years. The longest ones I know of lasted 4 or 5 years for redoing a lot of the rules, if not the setting, because amazingly, not everybody likes playing generic fantasy settings. So
who are these people?
Some of them like playing other games.
Who are these people?
I mean, my local LARP system here in Cambridge has gone through the university LARP system. It's gone through about 3 or 4 genres. It's cycled back to complicated fantasy, but it's tried out other things along the way. Yes, things change, things evolve. How long does it take for real world nation to change its tone and its attitudes and its various plans on things? For example, and if you've got one that is player led, as in it's not the case for Empire, it is not the case that the writers are going, this is the plan, this is what we are going to do, this is where the story is going, this is what's going to happen. And if the players get in our way, well, they'll all have tragic accidents along the way. No. I have played in some LARPs like that. They tend to be different. But to give an example from a previous game that PD ran, they ran Odyssey. And I was playing in the Empires of Persia in that. And it started off, the brief was Zoroastrianism, i.e. it's a 2-god system. But the old pagan gods of Persia are all still accorded a certain amount of respect and accord. And it turned out that a lot of the Persian players wanted to play a pagan system. So about a year into the game, there was a small revolution, and the groups that stuck to the brief ended up dying in a small, brutal religious civil war. I.e., the player base decided to change what the nation was.
Yeah.
Because that's what they wanted to do. And the writers went, oh, that's interesting. Scribble, 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 scribble.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, we will take careful notes.
So Odyssey, was that a PD?
Yes, it was.
So do you think that they have? Because I heard a little bit. I've heard a little bit about the previous game Maelstrom, and what the rule set was and the power levels and things like that, and the things they might have changed later on. So do you think they've learned from things like you say, like the Odyssey, and they've certainly claimed to have learned from these things.
PD do their own podcast in which they discuss things like designs and such.
Yes.
I mean, they went through several different methods of how the battles at Empire worked. They explored in play.
Yeah.
At one point, they had 5 battles over the course of an event.
Yeah.
For example, but they have taken various aspects and tweaked them. They have taken various things and either streamlined them or expanded on them and such like. One thing they did, for example, was Maelstrom had a hellaciously complicated downtime system. Odyssey, that came after it, functionally didn't have any sort of downtime system. Empire has got a compromise where it's a fairly simple case of drop-down menus based on your skills. Pick one of these options, which may have been explored or expanded in play. That's it.
Yeah.
You are not, for example, in your downtime, going to be able to take your character Godric on a round-the-world expedition to find another 3 foreign nations to trade with.
That's what they think. They've never met Godric. No, I like the
Good
simplicity.
luck, I posited that as an answer. They said no.
I like the simplicity of it. I got to admit, yeah, I really do, because it's especially for a festival LARP and the people that are coming into it. You want to make it as beginner friendly. You want to make it as easy to get into as possible. And telling people, oh yeah, you have to do all this stuff when you've come back from your event, and you need to go back to work, and now you've got to do 6 weeks of work and do normal life things like be a responsible adult in between, and you've got other things going on in life, and going, oh, if you want to keep playing this game, you need to go online, do this. If you can minimize that, to convince people to come into the game, the better.
In Empire, I think the most complicated downtimes is probably going to be for basic characters, probably going to be the artisans who are basically making magical items for everybody else themselves between the events. Yes. And in that case, what they need to do is select several options from the menus that they have set up and chosen.
Yeah.
Anything more than that is very much elective. Yeah. You can play the sort of character who sends out letters to people in downtime, who organizes things, but that's very much a case of you chose to do that.
Yeah,
you knew what was on the list when you did it.
Yeah,
and as a lovely example, if you get sort of in the winter a piece of letter courtesy of Royal Mail, and you open it and it's this parchment waxed thing with full calligraphy and a large formal seal on it, that does make for a heck of an extra snippet.
I would love that. I would definitely love that from Rion. I'm expecting that now. Let's make a note. Make sure it's on parchment.
I love in-character mail. I absolutely love doing it as well. Although I found myself writing to the children in the nation.
Yeah. So
I've been putting together these beautiful parchment things with the wax seal for 2 of the kids in the nation. Yeah. Because I'm like, this is just, I know they're going to love this. They're going to love getting this.
They do. My son spent most of COVID carefully, every so often, opening up his little pouch of coins and resources that he'd acquired, or saying, "Daddy, can we play with the swords?"
Yeah, the kids are so into it. So your kid,
kids are vicious.
Yeah, they are. And they know the system.
Get them on your side.
Yeah, they know the system.
To quote from another setting, "What need have I for height when my enemies come all the way down to the ground?"
Yeah. Dude, That's pretty good. That's pretty good. So I because I personally know your kids, but did you? So I kind of know their ages, but did you kind of discuss with them? Oh yeah, we're going to this thing called Empire, or were you just like, oh, right, we're off to Empire, let's do it?
Well, you know me. What do you reckon the probability is of me not frothing about it to a captive audience?
Oh yeah, well I bet they just I bet they
I'm
take
pretty
it
sure
in
they
through
grew up on
osmosis.
this.
Yeah, Trey.
Did you? Yeah.
Michael came to Empire for his first time when he was about 3.
Mhm.
So we've got some photos of him sitting there in a little white hood and little white smock, sitting on a blanket, going,
Amazing.
which is the state that my daughter is now at as well.
Yes.
But they go, and from the point of view of the children, it's a great big game of let's pretend with all the adults playing along.
Yeah.
And giving them plenty of leeway to run around.
Yeah. It's just,
and fall in the mud.
Yeah.
Or steal.
Yeah. I mean, it amazes me that it's taken me 34 years, 33, 34 years to actually get into this hobby, because that's literally what I'd love to do.
Don't
anyway.
be hard on yourself. For the last, as I mentioned, it's taken off in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And then it was ticking along fairly slowly for about 10 years before that. But before that, it was fairly small and fairly out of the way.
Yeah.
And partially we ended up we got a certain amount of worries in splash from Dungeons and Dragons occasional bad reputation in the USA and similar. Yes. Partially it was because it is a fairly niche hobby. It is a fairly geeky thing to do. And certainly at the start, there wasn't a lot of guidance specialist companies manufacturing this sort of thing. There were people making their own costumes out of foam and gaffer tape.
Yes.
Gaffer plate armor.
Yes.
Was one that I remember.
Nice.
So and with it would tend to be somewhere out of the way and fairly obscure, which meant that a lot of the older gamers that I know of came across it either to a small extent through cosplay or through pre-established gaming groups such as Dungeons and Dragons, or through university, where you would get all of those combining plus an atmosphere of let's try something new and slightly geeky.
Yes.
In a safe environment.
Yes. Well, it's
you say you're complaining you're 34 before you found it, but I'd have been very impressed if you found it before you were 15. You were about 15.
Well, I tell you what. So when I was in high school, there was literally like one person who did it, and he talked about it quite a lot. And he was he was like a friend, not in our close friend groups. We were older, but he used to talk about it a lot because we were all into fantasy. We were into fantasy books. We're in Lord of the Rings came out when I was like 13, so we were in. It was like
the
fantasy,
films, not the books.
Yeah, the films, the films. Yeah, it didn't exist when the books came out. But yeah, he was into fantasy, and then he would talk about, oh yeah, we do this LARP thing, and he would always, but also this was a teenage boy talking about it as well. Sometimes he would be like, he would big it up, but he would almost like put us off it as well, because he would be like, oh yeah, we wear real chainmail and we really hit each other in the face, and we go full on at each other and this, that, the other, and we there's this one person who plays an orc and he does this to us. So we were sort of interested, but it was like there was no way of looking it up on the internet later on. There was no way of seeing what it was actually like if you went along with this kid from school to these strange group of people. What were you going to find?
There was an occasion now about 15 years ago when I did end up escorting a small child, young teenager, along to one of these events. In that case, it was alongside my younger brother, and he was of 13 or so. And by that point, I'd been doing LARP 5 years. I could explain it. I could explain. Thanks to my parents, who had various friends who'd come around and say, "So, what are you doing at university? And can you tell me about this crazy hobby I've heard?" So I had to explain LARP a lot. I say the Lord of the Rings films helped because I was able to describe it as historical reenactment crossed through Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
Or possibly full contact improvised role Shakespeare
Yeah.
was another one.
Yeah. It's
But
it's definitely
explaining
getting
it to somebody, it had to be done carefully, especially if it's a case of dragging along under 18s.
Yes. Yeah.
And in that case, I was able to say, I will be looking after him. I will give him some body armor. I'll make sure he's fine.
Yes.
And I will keep an eye on him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely getting there, because I've got clients even now that I talk to about it, and just this part of the world that we actually live in, there's a lot of reenactment events and things like that. A lot of historical battles happened around here, and people know reenacting. I've got clients that are involved in reenacting, or they've got partners that are involved in reenacting, and then when you explain LARP to them, I'm like, oh, I'm going LARPing, and they still don't quite get it. They're just like, oh yeah, this, that, the other. I'm like, yeah, but it's like, it's in a fantasy world.
I've sometimes described LARP as historical reenactments, irreverent little brother.
Yeah.
Going, hi, I'm gonna just have fun with all the big toys, and I'm not gonna care about the authenticity. Let's go. Whee!
Yeah. It's
the other useful explanation you might like, if you're having to explain this to people in a context they might understand. This is explaining Empire event. Imagine a Shakespearean play, complete with all the politics, romance, comedy, sword fighting, fairies, magic, and confusion about who's in what costume, with 1,000 actors, all of whom are convinced they're the main character, none of whom have a script. On a stage, 1 kilometer along each edge, lasting 3 days.
like it.
And they can go from A Midsummer Night's Dream or Macbeth or The Tempest and expand up from there.
I like it.
Thank you, Shakespeare.
My favorite description of Empire yet.
Yeah, it's soundbite, because it's very the problem we have had, right, Geoffrey, right, is the fact that a lot of people who we want to who explain it to, they are put off by the combat, and we didn't instantly go into this hobby thinking we would both enjoy the combat side of it. But both of our characters are quite martial, so a lot of the time we get like hyped up about the martial side of the game, and then people go, oh yeah, I'm like, yeah, you should come. They're like, oh no, I'm like, oh, but honestly, it's not all. So trying to explain to them, there's so much more to it than just the combat is difficult.
When I'm explaining and telling and frothing about Empire to people, or LARP in general, I tend to have a few print-offs of photos. So I'll have several A4 sheets with various photos taken. And while a couple of shots of the martial battle scenes are good, you don't want too many of them.
Yes. Because
there is a lot happening. I mean, how much of the time at Empire do you, playing a martial character, actually spend fighting?
Well,
a quarter of the time?
A quarter of the time, I would die. I would die if it was a quarter of the time.
Well, come on, it's two. You're doing 1 morning, 2 mornings of large sprawling battles, and probably several hours of quests and tournaments the rest of the time.
Yeah.
So, I think a quarter of it's probably about right.
Yeah.
But that's even you. That's even you going waving your sword around as frequently as you can.
Yeah.
So there's plenty that you do.
Oh yeah.
Your last couple of podcasts, you ended up talking almost as much about your grand quest of collecting love stories than you did about the fighting.
But that's the more important thing. I mean, yeah, that's getting more into sort of like character stuff a little bit now. But that's what makes the fighting important and insignificant. Yeah, because. You are a warrior, but especially, I mean, again, this might be a Dornish thing, but that idea of being, a warrior poet, which is pretty much
this is something that turns up in D&D games as well, and also in LARPs that have a long running story. If you've got a story, if you've got a reason to be there, you're not just fighting. You're fighting for something. You've got emotional attachment. You've got a desperate impetus, both perhaps in game and out of game, for what you want to happen in this. And that contributes to it being a grand story. If it's a case of, we all went fighting, we had a great time, we killed 100 orcs, I've got no idea what was it for, that's not so much as, we managed to get on the battle that we'd been training for and preparing for months, and we got there and we did the thing and we made it, and we lost many friends, but they died doing what we knew we were all doing it for, and we have achieved this victory.
Yeah,
and that's how I get stories.
Yeah, but
exactly.
but that's what that is on the brief though, right? Because it's like great deeds are eternal.
That's not just that's for everybody.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you think that, because I've definitely heard like when people are talking about Dawn, they do say like the former of what you said. A lot of them are like, oh yeah, if I want to whatever, my next character is just going to be a Dawnish knight, and then we're just going to go slap happy and we won't care. And I'm like, that's not my experience of in Dawn at all. It's
how long do you think they'd last before they started caring?
Not very long, because I think they would realize
about 10 minutes.
Yeah. I think they would realize,
I mean, the thing is that Empire is big enough, you can get that sort of thing, but it does tend to turn up more almost by accident.
Yeah.
Somebody in another podcast said, well, I came back from the fight, but I've got no idea what we were fighting for.
Yeah.
To which the person they were talking to said, yeah, that's because you're a grunt. Which was, if you are playing the sort of character who will happily just sign up for anything, then you can get away with playing that. You can manage playing that. Yeah. But if you want to find out why you're there, what's going on, it's dead easy to get into the story, if not sort of the plot line, if not the planning of everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I definitely,
If you're not careful, you'll always have somebody like me around to tell you the story of it all.
Yes. Too right. Yeah. No, that you're again, like the history and things like that. It's so much better when you hear it from other players.
It's nice trying to assemble the various bits of story. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have a project that I'm trying to do on a back burner at the moment in terms of story. Mm-hmm. Can I tell you?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. The excuse I give to this is that in character, I was teaching my son about our currency, and the currency is 20 rings to the crown and 8 crowns to the throne. For 8 crowns were given up for the imperial throne. At which point he looked up at me and said, "And then what happened to the crowns?" And I went, "Ah." But just the case of how did all the various nations join the empire? Mm-hmm. What is everybody's individual founding story? Mm-hmm. Because Dawn's got a good one, but what's everybody else's? Yeah. So I'm trying to collect all of those in game, which makes interesting fun, because I'm asking people, please tell me about this bit of your backstory, and they're going, I'm not sure if we've got it written down anywhere.
So your current Empire character is a troubadour bard, right? Was that something that you always had in the back burner anyway, or were you like, what haven't I played yet? I'm going to play storyteller.
Good question, and interesting example of character development, because I started off going, I'm going to take a step back, having played my last martial frontline knight. Mm-hmm. Take a step back and try having fun with the battlefield magics. Mm-hmm. So I said, yes, I'm going to be just playing healer wizard. But at this point, my character had the problem, which was that he was being played by me. So when he wasn't actually on the battlefield, he liked to tell stories. Mm-hmm. Additionally, there are some very talented people in Dawn who've come up with some various good songs. Several good stomping songs to sing as we march into battle. It's a shame you didn't meet. You may have met Maz Wilberforce, who's now playing an egregore in the marches.
I've had a brief interaction with her in the marches. Yeah,
she said when she joined Dawn, because her second character was Dawn, what attracted her to him was something almost out of Lord of the Rings. They were singing during the battle, during the fighting. The line from Lord of the Rings was, "And they sang as they slew, for the joy of battle was upon them."
Yes.
But she said Dawn were the first group I'd come across in a LARP who sang during battle, not before, not of it afterwards, but during it.
So yes, soak it in.
Yep. Yeah. So, and that is something that we happily did. So it meant that Geoffrey had a huge stock of interesting stories, several of which he'd picked up or experienced in previous years.
Yeah.
And I wanted to tell them. So I thought, I'm going to carry on telling these stories. And that's become more of a focus. Mm-hmm. to the point I really don't want this character to die, because then I have to play a character who's not quite so much of a storyteller. I'll have loads of good ones.
It's difficult. It's difficult to think about. Like, even though
Yeah.
these are our like our first LARP characters, and they survived their first year. But
Yep.
even to think about it is like the only time I have actually thought about, all right, okay, I haven't got a backup character, but I have thought about being like, maybe I should like plan some like different lineage makeup just in case I die early and I need to make it obvious that I'm someone else for the weekend.
That's a good plan.
That's the extent I've got to.
Draw gear is always an easy one for that.
Yeah. I've kind of thought like, I think you thought like a Naga or a Drogear or something, just to be like, to make it very obvious that I'm not me anymore for this weekend.
Yeah.
You know?
I might have had a practice at some Naga makeup last couple of months.
Yeah. Because I think that would be
so
my
I knew
plan.
what I was doing in case of
Yeah. My plan
For
would just be
confused
like,
watchers, the draw gear end up looking like white-faced ghouls. The Naga end up looking a little bit snake person to one extent or another.
yeah,
For clear definition.
yeah.
I being a changeling.
Yeah, no, yeah, I like being a changeling. You get, I think that's the thing. You do get attached to them, don't you? You know, and that's,
Yes, you do.
yeah, but
when I was playing LARP at university, I came back to my halls of residence one afternoon, in a dreadful sulk, uncommunicative and angry at the world in general. And one of my flatmates looked over and said, "Did your character get killed?" Yeah, you could tell.
Oh, that's amazing.
One of the things that contributed to current characters' songs is that, as I said, I've had 2 characters killed, and the funerals weren't very good. So I thought, what we need is a bit more ceremony, which is how I ended up writing up several songs, including songs for funerals.
Yeah.
Because if we're doing full tragedy and glory and melodrama, we need some more ceremonial songs to sing over our fallen.
Well, that's so you got me with the with that one song, because thing is, but you got me because you sung it at the beginning of the weekend, and it was exactly the same song, exactly the same lyrics. And it was because it's about dawn, and you're like, oh, that's a great song, and we I think it was like the Friday night or something, and it was like, oh, that's great.
I spent a while during lockdown composing that.
Yeah, it's fantastic. You need to record it and put it on MP3.
Do you want? Hey, shall I sing the verse that made Oliver cry?
Yeah, yes. So I heard this song on, it must have been the Friday night of E2 or I think it was E2, whatever. It was on like the Friday night, and then Dawn went out to battle, and we came back, and then there were dead Dawnish people in the Glory Square, and then Geoffrey starts singing the same song, but it had his same lyrics, but it had a completely different tone, meaning.
Well, second half of it, funereal tone. Though our knights may fall in battle, felled by York or poison worm, through the labyrinth they march singing, and to dawn they will return. Keep their faces in your memory. Keep their names proud in your songs. Keep their colors in the sunlight. They'll be back to us sail on. Every day a nation symbol, every morn our pride reborn, till they break the world around us. They will never stop the dawn. That is a filk. The original is a song called Now the Carnival Is Over by a group called The Seekers that my parents had on CD, and the original one is a slow melancholy leave-taking song that I adapted.
Well,
but it made for good
oh, it's fantastic.
Easy one to film.
It's fantastic.
It hit so well, especially the fact that like Oliver said, when you came, and it was our sort of 10 to E2, and it's when you came and you were just singing it to
We'd
us.
like to hear a
And I'm like,
song.
wow, that's such a lovely song. It's
Yeah.
so nice. And then when it hit that different tone, I remember Oliver like crying and like everyone just, you know, they worked so well because it was the fact that obviously, yeah, it was really sad, but also kind of happy at the same time with what you were saying.
Yeah, but the storytellers, like that's the thing about the bars and the troubadours. Everyone has it at different levels, you know, because you know you have a good focus on it. There are people who have a musical focus on it, but then there are characters that literally will just tell the one-off story about, you know, what happened to them in this certain battle, and then this happened. And you experience that, and you experience the world that way instead of because you can read the wiki, that's fine.
Yeah.
But experiencing those stories and then hearing what those characters went through, and it's like, oh great, and you're drinking ale and mead and wine around a fire, and you're like, oh okay, that's interesting. And then the following day you're actually out in battle yourself, and then you're experiencing these things, and you're seeing the people that told you the stories are actually in action, and things are happening, and it's happening to you.
It makes an extra layer of the world because the world has its own stories, its own legends, its own rumored things that somebody has seen once in the middle distance. And that means that the next day you're not going, what is that thing? I think I need to look it up in the player's handbook. You're going, I remember that. I was told about that last night. Run, lads!
Yes.
Oh,
yeah. It's amazing.
A lovely thing that happened to me at the last event. One thing my character's been doing is he's meant to tell a story to get over his fear of the Imperial orcs in play. You know, to tell a story to the orcs, and he turned up, and 98% of them left the camp at the same time. They were going to their anniversary of their enfranchisement. What's the term for freeing of slaves? Manumission.
Oh,
yeah. Something like that. Anyway,
yeah.
they were going to a big anniversary, and there was only one guy left behind who's going, yeah, I've done this 1,000 times. I'm not doing it again. I'm staying here. So I said, well, I'll tell you the story. And I told him the story, and it was the story of the very first event. And in Dawn, which is just as martial as the Imperial Orcs, there are probably about a dozen characters left who were in the very first event. So I tell it to this one orc that's left, and by the end of it, he's looking up at me with tears in his eyes and saying, I know, I was there. Which gets to a point which almost gets it. There's a piece in one of the Lord of the Rings films, Elrond complaining, I was there. I remember. I was there 3,000 years ago. This means an awful... You're telling the story, but it means a lot to me as well.
Yeah. Well, there's the story you tell about Dawn and the Imperial Orcs. And that is like... That's the thing. From what Godric knows about these other nations, because I decided to make Godric relatively naive on other nations... yeah, and so what he knows about the Imperial Orcs is what like Brion has told him about the Orcs, and what the interactions that other people have he's had with the Orcs in person. So he automatically has this respect for the Orcs, and also I kind of note because I've heard you tell it like 2 or 3 times now. So there's probably come a time when Godric is interacting with the orcs, and I'll probably relay that story in his own way. But that informs me how to play Godric interacting with the orcs, because it's just like, oh wow, well I know the history between Dawn and the orcs, or what I've been told through troubadours.
What you've been told, which may not be entirely accurate.
It might not be true at all, but that's the cool thing, isn't it?
There is, for example, a guy in Varushka called Alderai the Fair. Now, I strongly suspect this is a character. Well, I don't know, but Alderai the Fair is a name from their backstory, and you look it up on the wiki, and he's definitely one of their villains.
Okay.
And I previously asked this character. I got stuck in a tent with him. He was saying, so what do you know? I've heard this about you. He said, no, let me tell you the real story. And he told me a completely different, very slanted story. So I don't know what the heck's going on.
Yeah.
Well, my character doesn't, because my character doesn't have access to the wiki. But it means that there's a certain amount of rumor, speculation, hearsay, and misinterpretation to go with the occasional national cliches, which again makes the whole thing a lot more realistic.
Yeah, isn't that so good though? It's so
good.
It's so good.
It is. I mean, some years ago, for example, Dawn was marching onto the field alongside Navarre, and a rumor went by around of Yeah, that group in Navarre, yeah, don't trust them. Why? Well, we've heard various things. Don't trust them. Yes. And this had been, as I eventually found out, the result of a miscommunication, a misunderstanding, and a few actual cases of statements of malicious intent that nobody intended to carry out. But it meant that several nations were looking at each other with a certain amount of suspicion.
Wait, was this year? Because I think
This was about 4 years ago.
Oh, 4 years ago. We got caught up in.
So yeah, similar thing happened this year.
Because like Aranel got just like left high and dry, and her lance by a load of Navari, and I later found out, like, out of character, apparently there was an altercation between Navari players and Dornish players at a player event, and there was some miscommunication, and that's why they got left.
Have you ever? Excuse me a moment.
No, don't worry.
Have you ever read or seen the adaptations of the Sharp books by Bernard Cornwell?
No, I haven't. No.
And the Napoleonic Wars bits.
Mm-hmm.
And they've got a lot of extra bits in that, where, for example, you might have officers that don't like each other or don't trust each other, or have an inclination, even though they're on the same side, to see the other guy fail.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which, and I'm fairly sure this is reasonably realistic, but it does mean you can have the same thing mapped across to Empire.
Oh.
Where you have a case of people going,
I am
well,
certain of it.
They're on our side, but, you know, we don't entirely trust them to come to our aid, or
I am
we'd rather watch them get really screwed up so that we can sweep in and rescue them.
I have experienced it.
That's
probably on both sides.
And at its most extreme, rare level, that gets to the occasional bit of player versus player on the battlefield. Where it's a case of, we're between enemy lines, and I never liked you anyway. Stab, 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 stab.
Yeah.
He fell, holding them off while I got away. What a shame.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's good though, because it is like I say,
it adds extra flavor.
It adds the flavor. It brings you close, because you are. I mean, like I say, like. You got to be careful playing with those themes of like tribalism, obviously, because it's got very negative connotations in the real world. But when we're playing this type of game, that's kind of what you're encouraged to do, you know.
It's the borderline between, because all the player characters are on the same side. There is no option for this.
Yes.
It's the borderline between rivalry, friendly competition, to rivalry, to backstabbing each other.
Yes.
To give another example, previous game I said PD ran, Odyssey. I quite like this. It was one of their first games where they did a full, this is your nation, and this is what it thinks of the other nations. The sort of thing you may have encountered in a tabletop game, where each faction has got a little line or two of what you think of the other nations, and perhaps reverse. But this meant that they built pretty much a small arena for this game, for Odyssey, and they had the 5 sides at the start, 5 sides at the start, which was Greece, Persia, Egypt, Carthage, and Rome. And courtesy of good briefing, careful ruling, everybody having plenty of time to understand the setting, it took maybe an hour to turn 1,000 friendly, laid-back, liberal, and accepting gamers into 5 tribes of chanting football hooligans, shouting abuse and insults to each other across the stadium.
That is exactly.
Credit to my friend David Birch, who managed to get the crowd screaming insults in hieroglyphics.
But that's what I mean. You got to be careful when you're playing with those things. But in a LARP system, in a game system, that's a good place to play with these parts of human nature.
Yes.
You know.
Although in that case, you have to be careful not to get too many bits. Odyssey had the issue that it was quasi-historical.
Yes.
As in, it was fantasy historical. So there were a couple of cases where people took ideas associated with the nation and used them in the game.
Yeah, you got to be careful.
And that got to the occasional screaming argument.
Yeah.
A note that I remember from the Empire Wiki is you're not allowed any real-world racism, any any sort of ageism, sexism, etc.
That's a good thing.
But you can be significantly distrustful of the changelings, for example, and think that at any moment they're going to go off half-cocked and start a killing spree.
Well, that's the good thing about the lineages, isn't it? The lineages are.
But you could also be prejudiced against orcs, for example.
Yeah, they're totally.
I.e.,
high
here
fantasy.
are the in-game things that you're allowed to be.
Yes.
Ist about.
Yeah.
Yeah, so high fantasy. That's what another thing I like about it. It's just
Yeah.
like, right, it's high fantasy. This is a setting. The setting is gender blind. That's just it. It is blind to that. That's
Yep.
great. That's a good
LARP,
thing when you have a
LARP
non-historical
has
setting.
always, or particularly where you get onto the systems where the non-combat guys, non-combat folks can do fairly well.
Hmm.
You can have some fairly gender blind almost characters as well.
Hmm. Yeah.
I've heard stories about, for example, some American LARPs where it is still the American football players who are hugely fit and strong and are able to pick up their fellow players and throw them about,
Yeah.
who have got the advantage in a physical combat.
Yeah.
But if you've got, where you've got cases where anybody can be anything and get away with it, then you can happily have fun and everybody can try all sorts of other things.
Yes.
Some in LARP, as opposed to any other hobby I know of, with the possible exception of cosplay, you may want to check on me, there is a significantly larger amount of cosplay, crossplay, gender play, for want of a better term.
Yeah.
Basically, everybody has the freedom to be whatever they want.
Yes.
Applies also in D&D. There's a line in that the chief of PD, Matt Pennington, said in one of these podcasts, that of the difference between these two, which is that in a tabletop role play, you can be whatever you can imagine. But in a LARP, you can be whatever you have to be, whatever you can convincingly portray.
Yes. Yes.
I can visualize Oliver. I can think of Oliver playing a 4-foot tall hobbit in a tabletop RPG. I don't think he'd do very well playing one in a LARP.
Yes. Yeah. I think that sometimes the
I can't picture Robin playing an ogre in a LARP. Either,
yeah, it's well, we'll see.
Hi.
We'll see. that is that's maybe one of the smaller barriers that some people from tabletop can't get over, because some people are like, oh, I actually have to be, actually be. I don't want to say be charismatic, but I like some people aren't people.
You can get a little bit on some skills, but you can't just roll the dice and rely on the character sheet. If you are wanting to play a character who does public speaking, you're going to have to do at least some public speaking.
Yeah.
And you can hide behind the mask of the character and make them do it, but you are going to have to stand up and do that.
Yeah.
If you, Oliver, are going to play the sort of knight that runs around in steel chainmail and can chase 10 orcs the length of a field, you're going to physically need to be able to do that, unfortunately.
Who would think?
This did actually have a bit of a problem. A bit of a long-running problem in LARP generally, related to armor.
Yeah.
If you don't mind me going off on this small tangent.
No, go for it.
Go for it.
Which is, I mentioned gaffer plate earlier. When LARP was starting, you have people who say, I want to play an armor knight, therefore I need to make myself some plate armor. I can do this with cardboard and gaffer. And my very first LARP, when I was about 7, had cardboard and tinfoil. You could do it for LARP, where you expect to get thumped with cardboard, cushion foam, gaffer tape over the top of it. It doesn't look very good, but it gives the right general impression. Because the trouble you have is that if you restrict it to, no, it's possible to buy actual reenactment grade plate armor. Therefore, if you're going to play the armor knight, do it in the right sort of armor. At which point you're restricting the person playing the armor knight to the person who can buy, afford, store, and indeed carry the actual FISRA.
Yes. Yes.
Which can be a bit of a problem.
Yes.
What they did for Empire most recently, I think I'm not sure if it was done before lockdown or during it, was they actually altered the rules on that to allow altering heavy armor, which previously was actual heavy iron and steel heavy chain or actual plate armor, to allow for resin plates and any sort of armor, which means that those people who have, for example, slight knee problems, or who are perfectly happy running around for 2 hours but can't do it carrying an extra 5 kilos of iron, can do it wearing 1 kilo of this resin polymer plate, which looks the business, so it doesn't really affect the immersion too much, but it means it's not quite so effective. What they then did additionally was they put in extra rules so that if you've got the full heavy plate armor anyway, you get a shiny bonus available that nobody else gets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you have the flip side, which is I put all this money into making the game better with all these extra props, and now that's been thrown away.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
See,
balancing that
yeah.
has always been tricky.
Yeah,
It's something that games designers have had to deal with.
It's difficult because then obviously, because you mentioned the monetary side of it as well, like the polyplate is more expensive than the metal armor, you know. So the light, a lot of time the lighter armors are more expensive as well, and especially so if we're like trying to sell like Dawn to people, and you know as well as we do, you don't have to be in Clank to be in Dawn. But people will look and go, oh yeah, you know, if I want to be like this warrior, and I look at the Dawn brief, and you've got all these people in all their chainmail, their plate mail, they've got several weapons on them, and then they look at the Navari pictures and the Wintermark pictures, and they go online and have a look and go, it's a way easy, it's easier to get into Wintermark because it's just so readily available, the kit.
Yeah,
as opposed to
that's a perception issue.
I think it is
instead of an actual one.
I think it is.
Yeah. Because the perception of Dawn a lot of the time is of the armored knight.
Yes.
The perception of Wintermark is, I'm afraid, the Viking far too much of the time.
Yeah.
And you get TV shows like, well, to be fair, I mean, you could get you could get things like Game of Thrones that has got the martial characters sitting there in a tunic.
Yes.
In the same way as you've got the Vikings, like he's just sitting there in tunic and hose.
You could be a Dornish noble in just having a gambeson. That's light armor. That gives you a hit point. You know.
Yep. Or just sort of several sort of flowing robes and various other bits and pieces. For that matter, heck, I could be playing my character as a noble and he'd still be in robes because he's playing magician. But the various other characters might not do it. There was a guy who famously ended up playing his knight errant character for a year wearing a sack.
Yeah.
But that was an extreme example.
Yeah. You can do it.
To answer your original question though, yes, the initial costume brief for Dawn and Highguard and a few other of the Shining Clank nations looks high. But as I mentioned, to a certain extent, this is perception bias caused by the photos. As I said, those are the top photos by the top authors of the best people. Additionally, there are lots of ways to start very small, very slow, build it up in play. And on top of that, there's also the option of get friends, talk to the community, ask what they've got.
Friends
I believe I ended up giving you advice and saying what you need to play Knight Errant is a shirt with that symbol that's on the shield behind him at the moment, viewers.
Yeah.
And that's it.
That's
it. And that makes that gives you a defined role, a defined system, and also, in fact, a defined reason to wander around going, I've got no idea what's going on. Please tell me.
Yes.
And even for armor, etc., I know two groups in Dawn who rock up and say, we've got a chest of spare mail. Who would have it? I don't care if you're new. We would have you stand on the field of battle fully accoutred as a knight. Here, come on, we got it small, medium, large, what do you want?
Well, for us, we've been in the game like a year, right? And after 4 events, and we're now in the process of like making new kit for next year for ourselves. And already
I will point out you're biased because you were cosplayers to start with.
Well, this is it.
But yes, fair point.
So we're looking at making new kit, but already, I'm like, I'm going to be taking my old kit because I'm going to lend it out because then there's no way I'm going to leave my old chainmail behind because I'm going to take it because someone will inevitably need it. So
I have told people in my group, and several of them are new people, are saying, yes, we'll make it to the next event. I said, look, I am able to help you on almost anything that you bring. I have a spare tent. I have spare costumes. I have spare weaponry.
Yes.
We're fine.
Friends is the most powerful ability in Empire, which I like.
Oh, I don't know. There's 2 cheat codes for Empire. One of them is friends. The other one is good cardio.
Good cardio. Tell me about it.
Because even if you're not playing a combat character, just being able to do two laps of all the nations is a good plan.
Oh, I tell you what. You know what was made a massive difference to E3. I think it was E3. Yeah, it was E3 because we had no rain and the ground was so hard. Everybody was moaning about how much their feet hurt because there was no give in the ground because everyone did so much walking. So everyone on the field was like, we're struggling.
And win.
Noobs.
Yeah.
Or you remember the very first event The mud, it were up to our ankles. And when it froze solid at night, we were grateful because the traction improved.
You do get a bit of that, like being new players this year. You get like, because we were, I know it was cold E1, but really it was fine. Like it was sunny during the day. It was great, you know.
Rather, there was a notably cold and biting wind.
Yes,
I staggered off E1 with really badly chapped lips for starters.
Yeah, but there's definitely players that are like, oh yeah, you've not had a rainy one yet, you've not had a muddy one yet, and we're like, oh,
well,
yeah.
To be fair, I think you'll get this in any hobby.
Yeah, I think so. You haven't had this yet. You haven't had the real experience yet.
My local LARP system at one point included Anna and Pia. And Anna was from Finland and Pia was from Puerto Rico. So as soon as the temperature got about, Anna didn't find any of the cold particularly impressive, and Pia didn't find any of the heat particularly impressive.
Yeah, we're very much in the middle in this country. That's the thing.
Yeah.
It's like, very much in the middle.
But yeah, the Empire community, hell, the live action roleplay community as total is sufficiently friendly and welcoming to happily grab everybody along, because we know, or certainly we still have the feeling that we're still a bit of a niche geeky hobby.
Yes.
And so anybody who turns up, it's not a case of, who are these new guys? It's a case of, new friends, come. What can we lend you? What can we do to keep you here, to keep you playing, that you enjoy yourselves and come back again?
Yes. Well,
because
I can definitely...
there is still quite a high drop rate of people who come along for one and go, not my thing, and leave.
Yeah.
But again, you get that in any hobby.
Well, yeah, you do. That's the thing. We've had people come up to it. They've like listened to this show. You know, still can't believe people like listen to it. But yeah, sometimes people will come in and be like, oh, hey, I listened to the show, and they've like joined Dawn, and then they've realized that, oh, actually, I prefer to be in another nation somewhere else, and that's awesome. But yeah, coming in and giving it a go. Also, yeah, like we are. I can speak for me and Robin. Our characters are very friendly. I think I could probably speak for Geoffrey. Geoffrey's character is extremely welcoming, extremely friendly. So if you
I'm just after another audience.
Exactly. So if you're at Empire, please come over and say hello to all three of us, because we usually camp around the same area. We're never far away from each other. Three of us.
Yeah.
You've moved into my house.
Exactly. The best house in Dawn. Yeah, exactly. It's only going to get better. Now we have Godric on board. There we go.
Did you get spot the classical illusion going around last event?
No.
There was a painted helmet that was going to be given to the most glorious knight in Dawn.
What? Why did I miss this?
You were off collecting love stories.
I was off collecting love stories, yeah.
There's the old Greek myth about the golden apple given to the most beautiful woman in Greece.
Yes.
Which caused all sorts of problems. And what do you think happens if you ask Dawn to find which of you is the most glorious?
Oof.
You will end up with a large pile of bodies with one person at the top saying, well, I was the most glorious until the second guy chopped half my face off. But
yes. Now I need surgery.
That was being done by the House of Fools. You wouldn't be unsurprised.
No, I'm not surprised at that whatsoever. But briefly to go on the kit thing, we do actually have an idea, Robin and I, on possibly making like a video. We've talked about it. It's just trying to figure out how we're going to do it. Basically, doing a budget kit for every single nation for new players, as in.
Ooh.
There are a few, and hopefully
there will be a certain amount of crossover.
Yeah, we might be hitting you up for some advice and things like that, because
definitely.
Because obviously we know our nation quite well. I'm pretty sure we could put a Dawn kit together for like 50 quid, 40 quid, 50 quid.
If that. Ask on the Empire forums. I think look on there. It's been done there a couple of times.
Yeah.
But yes, there is, at its simplest, for costume for most medieval fantasy LARPs, you can get away with a fairly plain shirt with no logos on it.
Honestly, you can, yeah.
A fairly plain pair of trousers with a good belt and some hiking boots.
Yes.
And that you could probably acquire, if not, well, I can get that out of my wardrobe, but that's my job and career. But you could probably pick a lot of that up at charity shops.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
then with a few extra, and then you can tweak that to most nations in Empire and quite a lot of other LARPs with the accessories. I mean, for example, I picked up ages ago a sort of metallic black and gold weave scarf, sort of a long, wide scarf, shawl type thing. And that has served me as a belt sash, as a cummerbund, as an over-shoulder sash, as a headband, playing as all sorts of things. Things little pouches, little extra belts, extra little headpieces, jewelry.
Thing is, you know that as soon if someone comes and then they go, right, okay, this is for me, you know that then they're not going to be worried about going, and they just start collecting things and they make it their priority to collect more stuff. But what we kind of need is hey, it's okay to come to Empire. Honestly, you don't need all the armor, the weapons. You don't need water bottles. You don't need anything like that. Literally, it's just here is a basic kit for any nation you want to join. Come give it a go type thing.
Basic kit for any nation, I think, is going to be difficult.
It's difficult.
Basic kit for each nation, I think you could probably do reasonably easily.
Yeah. It's because well, I mean the one obvious one is like the Imperial Orcs, and you go, okay, you give yourself a budget, and then you're like, there's the obvious thing that you need, which is the mask. Exactly. So I don't know. We'll figure it out. Anyway, folks, we've been talking for like an hour and 40 minutes. Time has flown by.
Don't worry, he'll edit out all the blathering later.
Yeah, it'll be fine. Geoffrey, what are you up to during the long dark? Are you going to get to any player events? Any other different LARP systems you're playing?
I'm not playing any other LARP systems at the moment. I'd like to, because I've got 2 small children at home to juggle about. There is the local system. I live in Cambridge, and there's a university system that's going there that I'd like to investigate once or twice. As I said, it's cycled back to fantasy after visiting other genres. I haven't seen any player events crop up that I'm interested in, but I do a lot of driving at work, so I'm less keen to go driving over the hills and dales for another event for another day or two. Though one might well crop up. I haven't got anything planned at the moment. In terms of crafting various stuff, I may end up making up some more songs or drawing up some more bits and pieces. I've just got a note here saying send Godric a note. I say
yes. I want mail. I feel like we're in this a bit of a lull currently, where everyone's like, I'm assuming after, because this is our first long dark as well, so I'm assuming kind of after Christmas time, people will start building back up and getting a little bit more enthusiasm.
The hype train starts ramping back up as people stop having things to prepare for and start looking forward to the year ahead. During the long dark, the period between the major events, you get people working on craft projects, working on costumes, working on occasional plots and letters and things, or indeed making up new bits of completely new outfits. I don't have a great deal of that because my wife, in fact, makes most of my costume. Because she's very good at it and quite keen to do a lot of it. And indeed. Identical outfits for whole family.
No, your family's kit is just it's great, and obviously you're
beautiful.
Entirely credit to my wife.
Oh no,
my costume was nowhere near as good, but I married a seamstress.
Yes, that is the key. That is the key.
Yeah. Well, but I don't have a great deal planned for this moment. How about you?
I've got a ton planned because I'm now a noble, and now I'm gonna change my entire kit. So a lot of people have been asking me, are you coming to this player event, that player event? I'm like, I kind of need to save money and time for what I'm going to bring to E1 because it's going to be completely different. So that's where most of my money and effort is going currently.
What you might like, and what several of your friends who are slightly averse to combat might like, is that there are often quite a few social sanctioned events, which is between the grand meetings at the capital of Anvil. You will get things like people hosting banquets and meetings and grand balls and such, which is just the equivalent of almost a costume party where everybody turns up in their various costumes and will happily tell stories and make plans and swap plots and eat, drink, and be merry.
Yeah, I
And,
still need to turn up in a noble kit that I haven't got yet.
well,
So-
you don't necessarily need to. I mean, it would be perfectly
Oh,
fine.
Godric needs to. There's no way Godric wouldn't show up in his Yo-Folk kit again.
There's a lot you can do if you can justify it with a story. For example, what if your house is commissioning for you specially a set of nobles' robes, and in the interim you're therefore in your knight servant's robes?
Just my chainmail, nothing else.
You
We're
do have
talking about
clothes
that.
other
You
than
can't
chainmail.
do that.
Just my chainmail. Oh yes, my noble garb is.
I mean, your knight errant kit is the national garb.
It
It
is
is the national symbol.
It is.
It's the equivalent of a Scotsman wearing the Scottish tartans,
Mhm.
not the individual clan or family ones, but the national. This is available to everybody from
everyone's-
Scotland. Ones.
Exactly. That yeah. So yeah, well, that's the good thing about. I mean, that was the good thing about the knight errant kit, like the shield and that. Like I can. Honestly, I
It
can
has
use
resale
that for,
value.
Exactly, I can use that for another character. I can lend that out to people, and it's not going to be. It's never going to look out of place in Dawn because it's.
Yeah, like I was hoping to just like lend, because if everything goes okay next year, I'll get to be noble as well. But I was
And you've got
hoping
that
to
awesome
lend
chest
out.
piece.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I thought it's beautiful and I love it, but when I'm a noble, I'm not going to wear it. But I want someone else to go wear it, so I'm hoping someone else. I can just let people borrow it each time and just go wear it.
This is the good thing about having fairly generic characters, or indeed costume that is to a specific brief.
Yes.
Because, I mean, if it was some other impressive Dornish robe or Dornish armor, and it was you had to give it on, fine, you've got a whole other nation that can pass it on to various other people.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, my house has had a couple of people die over the last few years in distinctive coloured painted armor, but I've seen that armor popped up. Other people are wearing it. It's a case of yes, this is impressive heraldic armor with appropriate things. It works fine.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You might have trouble though, Robin. I'm not sure how many people will fit into that outfit.
Well, to be honest, that was one of the things I thought when I first came. I was like, so many people offered me things to borrow, and if it wasn't for those people giving me things to borrow, I think I would have been very light on the armor front for a couple of games.
No,
but at the same time, I was like, everything is huge. There's not a lot of smaller pieces getting sort of lent out, so that's why I was like, I'm going to be lending out all my stuff. I've got two full nice little sets to lend out to people.
Yes, the good thing is you don't suffer from being too specific. I mean, I've got several outfits that's hanging up in a wardrobe somewhere for another year or another system, because they were very distinctive for the character I was playing, who people might remember.
Yes.
On the other hand, my brother at another LARP system came back with something he'd pulled out of a dumpster there, where somebody had gone, I'm throwing away my character's ultra-specific kit. It was a chainmail shirt.
Oh, what?
It was size petite with built-in leopard spots. And I'm not sure. Yes, I'm not sure how easy it would be to find somebody else to wear that.
Oh man,
but yes, it's just a case of the over-specific costume.
Yeah,
but guys, I think we'll be fine for that.
Yeah, we'll be fine.
Yeah.
Anyway, we better wrap this up. We'll definitely have to have you back on. We'll get you back on before E1, 100% to Froth. We'll do a big build up. A few shows. This has been great, but I think we'll say goodbye to the podcast.
Good luck with the other podcasts.
Oh yeah, no, we'll circle back around. We had to start with Dawn. We had to start with Dawn people first.
Yeah.
We were like, oh yeah, we'll get some people from different nations on. Like, well, we're obviously going to.
Is this one in a series of 10 then?
One in series. Well, yeah, we'll see. We'll see if the other nations are speaking to us. I might end up like asking other people to come on. I'll be like, hey, I was that Dornish guy that came around looking for love stories, and they'll be like, nope.
Then don't ask them as Godric.
Then I'll message them after.
Ask them as Oliver and Robin, hosts of the highly successful and acclaimed.
Exactly. Fake it till you make it, Geoffrey. That's our plan. Right, we'll say goodbye to the audience. Thanks for coming on, Geoffrey. Cheers.
Bye, everyone.
See you later. Bye. If you enjoyed this show, make sure that you follow and subscribe so you know when a new episode is posted. You can leave a review, you can share it around. It would really help us out, and we appreciate you doing that. And remember, you can catch us live on twitch.tv/2have_2roll. That's the number 2 and roll is into roleplay.
Thank you very much for listening.